The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus left the house and sat by the lakeside, but such crowds gathered round him that he got into a boat and sat there. The people all stood on the beach, and he told them many things in parable. And he said, imagine a sower going out to sow. As he sowed, some seeds fell on the edge of the path, and the birds came and ate them up. And others fell on patches of rock where they found little soil and sprang up straight away, because there was no depth of earth. But as soon as the sun came up, they were scorched, and not having any roots, they withered away. And others fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. And others fell on rich soil and produced their crop, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Listen, anyone who has ears. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Thank you. You might remember, and I don't expect you to nod your heads at this one, but you might remember that last September I talked for about an hour on a verse from Matthew's Gospel, which is chapter 5, verse 1, at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. And it just said that Jesus went up the mountain to get away from the crowds, and he was joined by disciples, and he sat down and he taught them and the Beatitudes. And that was the beginning of a big section in Matthew, 3 chapters, on the Beatitudes. Now here we have a parallel verse to that at the beginning of chapter 13 in Matthew, where Jesus is surrounded by crowds and he can't get away from them, and how he teaches the crowds. Twice in the one verse it says he sat down. I told you before, rabbis to teach sat down, students stood up. How things have changed. Yeah. Let's go back to the old days, says the priest. Twice in the verse it says that Jesus sat down. That meant he's a rabbi and I'm teaching you, and if you want to learn, learn. Now the crowds were coming to Jesus because he fed them and because he healed them. They weren't particularly interested in learning anything. They were interested in food and they were interested in their health. That ring a bell? All right, that's for other people. All right. Now, we get the choice today of the long gospel and the short gospel. And you might think I took the short gospel because it was quicker and easier and we get out earlier and we'd be able to do other things more important for the rest of the day. Well, I did. Sometimes I've done that in my life, but not today. I took the short gospel because it's not a short and a long gospel. They're really two different gospels. One is a parable and the other is an allegory. What's the difference between a parable and an allegory? An allegory is the way you normally think. If I give a story, you want to know what every line in the story means and why it's there. A parable was a Jewish thing. It was a way of telling a fable. It was a way of telling just a story. The details don't matter one bit. What matters is there's a crowd of people there and you tell them a story in the open air. Parables happen in the open air. If I had you all out in the car park today and I was giving a sermon out in the car park, I would talk about cranes. Yes. Because you'd all be looking at the crane. That's right. What? When Jesus is by the sea and there's a farmer over there, he'll talk about a guy sowing seed because that's what you're looking at. You're not looking at him. You don't. If you've got some teachers here, if you're teaching outside, you don't teach algebra. They're not listening to you at all. They're watching what's going on behind you. That's why when we put you in here, we put behind me things that will help you not be distracted. All right. So a parable, it's just, Jesus says, a sower went out to sow the seed, and there was a harvest. Not all the seed produced the harvest. Some of it goes different ways. But if you want a harvest, you sow seed. It's as simple as that. The surest way not to have a harvest is not to sow any seed. That's all a parable is. It's dead set simple. Jesus said, if you've got ears to hear, let them hear it. They go in then, and the story Matthew says, they asked Jesus to explain it to them, and we got the explanation from Jesus, which is then the explanation of an allegory, and that probably took, as the church moved west, that's the way the people were thinking. They weren't thinking in the sense of, we've got fables in English language. If I say sour grapes, you know what sour grapes, if you say somebody's got sour grapes, you know what they mean. I've forgotten what the fable was. Can anyone remember the story from Aesop's fables about sour grapes? Some of you can, and they're good. Now I can't even remember the story. I can, if I say it's like the tortoise and the hare. You all know the story about the tortoise and the hare, and you know what it means. So likewise, Jesus says, if you want to harvest, you've got to sow a crop.